After everything I've done for you.
Why?
You don't belong here.
I stood before the mirror, smoothing the folds of my best silk dress, which I had bought specifically for this day, the wedding day of my only son, Michael. My reflection seemed to be well over 70, though I was only 65. Wrinkles, deep as ancient rivers, creased the skin around my eyes, bearing witness to years of laughter, tears, and sleepless nights spent caring for my family. My hair, once chestnut brown, was now silver, like moonlight, and I had carefully styled it into an elegant bun, adorned with a small pearl clip, a gift from my late husband, John, which he had given me on our own wedding day. My heart pounded with anticipation and a slight nervousness. This was the day I had dreamed of since Michael, my boy, first uttered the word Mom. I had invested not only my soul into this wedding, but also a significant portion of my savings, which I had accumulated over the years, denying myself many things. I remembered Michael, still so young, running through the house, his laughter filling every corner, his small hands clutching me tightly when he felt scared or simply wanted affection. I remembered his first steps, his first words, his school years, college, his first successes and disappointments. I was always there, always supportive, always believing in him. And now he stood on the threshold of a new life, and I, his mother, was supposed to be there, by his side, to share his joy. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I quickly blinked them away to avoid ruining my makeup. Today was not a day for tears. Today was a day for happiness. I descended the stairs, each step echoing with the slight creak of old wooden treads that remembered the footsteps of my husband and Michael when he was a child. Downstairs, silence awaited me. The house was empty. Everyone had already left for the banquet hall to greet the guests. I was always punctual, but today I decided to linger for a few minutes, to enjoy this moment alone with myself, with my memories. I checked that everything was turned off and then left, closing the door behind me, a door that seemed as old and faithful as I was. A taxi was already waiting at the gate. The driver, a young man with a polite smile, opened the door for me. On the way to the banquet hall, I looked out the window at the passing streets, bathed in sunlight. The city went about its usual life, but for me, this day was special, filled with deep meaning. I imagined Michael standing at the altar, so handsome and happy, his eyes shining with love for his bride. I hoped she would be worthy of him, that she would bring him the happiness he deserved. The banquet hall, rented in one of the city's most prestigious hotels, was magnificent. Huge crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting reflections on the pristine white tablecloths and sparkling silverware. The air was filled with the scent of fresh flowers and soft music that drifted from somewhere deep within the hall. I saw familiar faces, relatives, family friends, Michael's colleagues. Everyone was smiling, hugging, laughing, creating an atmosphere of celebration and joy. I felt my heart fill with warmth. I headed towards a group of relatives to greet them when I noticed Michael standing at the entrance of the hall with his bride, Tiffany. She was beautiful, I couldn't deny that. Long blonde hair, styled in intricate curls, cascaded over her shoulders, and her white, beaded gown fit her slender figure perfectly. But something about her gaze always unsettled me. A coldness, a calculating air that I couldn't explain. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just my maternal anxiety. I approached them, smiling. "Michael, my dear, you've grown so much, you look so handsome," I said, extending my arms to hug him. He hugged me back, but his embrace felt distant, not as warm as usual. "Mom, you're here," he said, and in his voice I heard a slight note of something I couldn't quite place. Then he turned to Tiffany. "Tiffany, this is my mother." Tiffany smiled, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Eleanor," she said, and in her voice I heard the same coldness that was in her gaze. I felt a slight prick in my chest. "Hello, dear. Congratulations to both of you." "I'm so happy for you," I replied, trying to be as sincere as possible. At that moment, Tiffany stepped forward, her face serious, and she looked directly into my eyes. "Eleanor, I'm very sorry, but I have to ask you to leave." My heart sank. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? What did you say? I whispered, not believing my ears. Around us, everything seemed to fall silent. The music softened, the laughter died down. I felt the gazes of other guests on me, who, apparently, had also heard her words. I said you have to leave, Tiffany repeated, her voice firm, without a hint of doubt or regret. I don't want you here. This is our day, and I want it to be perfect, without any unnecessary distractions. I looked at Michael, searching his eyes for support, an explanation, any sign that this was a joke, that I had misheard. But his face was impassive. He was looking away, avoiding my gaze. He said nothing. Not a word. My own son, whom I had raised, to whom I had given all my love and strength, stood by and remained silent while his fiancée humiliated me. The tears I had so carefully held back streamed from my eyes, burning my cheeks. I felt my hands tremble. Michael, what does this mean? My voice was barely audible. He finally looked at me, but there was no sympathy or remorse in his eyes. Only a slight annoyance. Mom, please don't make a scene. Tiffany is right. We want this day to be special. Your presence, it just doesn't fit into our plans. Doesn't fit into your plans? I repeated, and bitterness crept into my voice. I gave you my last savings for this wedding. I cooked for you, prayed for you, dreamed of this day. And now I don't fit in. Tiffany sneered contemptuously. Your savings? Yes, we appreciate your generosity. But that doesn't give you the right to ruin our celebration. We want to start our life with a clean slate without old habits. She uttered the word habits with such disgust, as if I were some dirty stain. I felt anger rising within me, mixing with pain and humiliation. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. I looked at the guests. Some averted their gazes, others whispered. Still others looked at me with pity. But no one came forward, no one said a word in my defense. I was alone. Completely alone. So this is it? My voice grew stronger, though everything inside me trembled. So my love, my sacrifices, my money, all of it means nothing to you? Michael still avoided my gaze. Mom, please just go. We'll talk later. Talk later. I laughed, and my laughter was bitter and full of despair. No, Michael. There will be no later. You made your choice. And I will make mine. I turned and walked away, feeling each step echo with pain in my soul. I heard whispers and laughter resume behind my back. I didn't look back. I just walked, trying to maintain my dignity, though inside me everything screamed with pain and fury. I left the hall, walked through the hotel lobby, noticing no one around. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. Let them flow. Let them wash away all the dirt, all the pain they had inflicted upon me. Outside, I hailed the first taxi I saw. Where to, madam? The driver asked. Home, I replied, my voice trembling. Please, just home. All the way home, I stared out the window, trying to comprehend what had happened. How could my son, my own Michael, do this to me? How could he allow that woman to humiliate me, his mother, on such an important day? The pain was unbearable. It pierced me through and through, leaving only emptiness behind. I felt betrayed, used, discarded like an old, unwanted thing. All my dreams of a happy old age, of warm family evenings, of grandchildren running around the house, all collapsed in an instant. I entered my empty house, and its silence seemed deafening. I took off my silk dress, which now seemed like a symbol of my humiliation, and threw it on the floor. I felt drained, yet at the same time, something new was stirring within me, a cold, burning determination. They thought I was a weak, old woman who could simply be cast out of their lives. They thought I meant nothing. But they were wrong. They were very wrong. I sat in the armchair in the living room, looking out the window at the darkening sky. Memories flooded my mind of how I had worked tirelessly to give Michael everything best. I denied myself new clothes, travel, entertainment, so he could attend a good school and get a decent education. I sold some family jewelry to pay for his college. I was always there when he needed help, advice, or just a shoulder to cry on. And now, when he had become a grown, successful man, he simply erased me from his life. The pain was so intense that I could physically feel it in my chest. I closed my eyes, trying to suppress a new wave of tears, but they still flowed, hot and bitter. I remembered how Tiffany, his fiancée, first appeared in our lives. She was so courteous, so sweet, so attentive. She constantly spoke of how much she valued family, how much she loved Michael, how she dreamed of a large and close-knit family. I believed her. I wanted to believe. I saw how happy Michael was with her, and I rejoiced for him. I even gave her my antique family ring, which had been passed down in our family for generations. I thought it would strengthen our relationship, that it would show her how much I had accepted her into our family. How wrong I was. Gradually, with time, her true nature began to reveal itself. First, it was small remarks, then direct instructions. She began to interfere in my relationship with Michael, turning him against me. She convinced him that I was too old-fashioned, that my advice was outdated, that I was interfering in their lives. Michael, who had always been such a sensitive and attentive son, gradually distanced himself from me. He started calling less often, visiting less often. And when he did visit, he was somehow detached, as if an invisible wall had grown between us. I tried to talk to him, to explain what was bothering me. But he just brushed me off, saying that I was imagining things, that Tiffany was a wonderful girl, and that I was just jealous. Jealous? Me? I just wanted my son to be happy, but not at the cost of my own dignity and respect. The last straw was the wedding preparations. I offered my help with everything, choosing the dress, organizing the banquet, compiling the guest list. But Tiffany rejected all my offers. She said they had their own ideas, their own plans, and that I could just come and enjoy the celebration. I felt useless, but I still tried to be helpful. I knitted them a beautiful blanket, which was supposed to be a symbol of their family hearth. I spent hundreds of hours on it, putting all my love and hope into every stitch. And then Michael asked me for money. A lot of money. He said they wanted a lavish wedding that everyone would talk about and that they didn't have enough funds. Without hesitation, I gave him all my savings, which I had saved for a rainy day. I believed that it would help them start a new life, that it would be my contribution to their happiness. I didn't even ask for a receipt or a promise to repay. I simply trusted my son. And now, after all this, she kicked me out. Kicked me out of the celebration that I helped pay for. Kicked me out of my son's life. The pain was so intense that I thought I couldn't survive it. But deep down, through that pain, a spark began to flicker. A spark of anger, determination, a desire for retribution. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't let this go. They would regret what they did. They would regret humiliating me. I got up from the armchair, walked to the window, and looked at the stars that had begun to appear in the dark sky. They seemed so distant and indifferent. But at that moment, I felt stronger than ever. I was old, but not broken. I was alone, but not lonely. I had a strength they didn't even suspect. And I was going to use it. The night after Michael's wedding was the longest of my life. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, and every rustle, every creak of the old house seemed deafening. The tears had long since dried, leaving only salty streaks on my face, but the pain in my chest hadn't gone away. It was sharp, burning, as if someone had torn a piece of flesh from my heart. I felt empty, betrayed, as if everything I believed in had crumbled into dust. Tiffany's words, her cold, contemptuous tone, and Michael's silence constantly replayed in my mind. Silence. That was the most terrifying part. Not her words, but his silence. It spoke louder than any words about how much he had distanced himself from me, how easily he had allowed his mother to be humiliated. I remembered his childhood, his first steps, his laughter, his hugs. Where was the boy I loved more than life itself? Where had he gone? Could this woman, Tiffany, have changed him so much? Or had he always been like this, and I just didn't want to see it, blinded by maternal love? I tried to find an explanation, an excuse for his behavior. Maybe he was under pressure? Maybe Tiffany had threatened him with something? But even if so, does that excuse him? Shouldn't he have protected me, his mother, from such humiliation? My mind refused to accept it. I tossed and turned, trying to find some position in which the pain would subside, but it was everywhere. in every cell of my body, in every thought. I got out of bed, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtains. Outside was pitch darkness, only a few streetlights illuminated the street. My house, once filled with life, laughter, warmth, now seemed as empty and cold as my soul. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, but even it tasted bland, as if I had lost the ability to feel anything but pain. I remembered how many years ago, when Michael was still very young, my husband, his father, passed away. It was a heavy blow. I was left alone with a small child, without means of support. But I didn't give up. I worked 2, sometimes even 3 jobs, to provide Michael with a decent future. I sewed on order, baked pies, cleaned apartments. I did everything I could so that my son would lack nothing. I remembered him coming home from school, his eyes shining with joy when I met him with a hot meal. I remembered how proud he was of me when I came to parent-teacher conferences. All of it seemed so distant, so unreal now. I sat at the kitchen table, holding my head in my hands. How could I have been so naive? How could I have trusted them so blindly? I gave them all my savings, which I had saved for old age, for a rainy day. I denied myself everything so they could start their life grandly. And what did I get in return? Humiliation, betrayal, pain. Suddenly, a thought flashed in my mind like lightning. I cut off funds. I said aloud, and the words echoed in the quiet kitchen. I remembered Tiffany's contemptuous sneer when she spoke of my savings. They thought I was just an old, helpless woman who could be used and then discarded. But they were wrong. They were very wrong. I stood up, feeling a new, unfamiliar strength stirring within me. It wasn't just anger. It was a cold, calculated determination. I wasn't going to cry and feel sorry for myself. I was going to act. I was going to show them what it meant to underestimate Eleanor. I walked to the old writing desk in the living room, where all my important documents were kept. I took out a folder with bank statements, contracts, my will. I sorted through the papers, and each one reminded me of years of labor, saving, sacrifices. I had never been rich, but I had always been good with money. My late husband, John, always said I had a golden head for financial matters. He entrusted all his savings to me, and I always tried to multiply them to ensure a comfortable old age for us. I found the receipt for the money transfer to Michael. The sum was substantial, almost all my savings. I remembered how he had convinced me that it was an investment in their future, that they would definitely return everything with interest once they got on their feet. I believed him. I always believed my son. And now that belief was trampled in the dirt. I closed the notepad, and a plan began to form in my mind. Not just a plan for revenge, but a plan for restoring justice. They wanted to start life with a clean slate? Well, I'd give them one. But this clean slate would be written by my rules. The morning brought no relief, only a strengthening of resolve. I woke up early, before dawn, and immediately felt a surge of energy. The pain in my chest hadn't gone away, but now it was not paralyzing, but a driving force. I showered, put on my most formal clothes, a dark suit I usually wore for important meetings. Today promised to be just such a day. I had breakfast, drinking strong tea, and began calling the right people. First, I called my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. He was an old family friend from my late husband's time. Mr. Harrison had always been a man of his word, a man I could trust. He knew all my affairs, all my assets, all my savings. Mr. Harrison, good morning, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though everything inside me trembled. Eleanor? Is something wrong? You're calling so early, he sounded concerned. Something is wrong, Mr. Harrison. A lot has happened. I need your help. I need to review all my financial matters, all my contracts, all my wills. And I need to do it very urgently. Of course, Eleanor. I'll clear my schedule right away. When is convenient for you? The sooner the better. Can you come to my house this morning? I don't want to leave the house. I'll be there in an hour, he replied without hesitation. I hung up the phone, feeling a slight relief. The first step was taken. While I waited for Mr. Harrison, I began gathering all the necessary documents, bank statements, real estate purchase agreements, insurance policies, stock certificates that my husband had left me as inheritance. I sorted through the papers, and each one reminded me of my life, my efforts, my dreams. Exactly an hour later, the doorbell rang. Mr. Harrison entered the house, his face serious. He immediately noticed my state. "Eleanor, what happened? You look very unwell." "Mr. Harrison, please sit down. I need to tell you everything." I told him everything that had happened at the wedding. I told him about Tiffany's words, about Michael's silence, about how I had been humiliated and kicked out. I spoke calmly, but there was a steely determination in my voice. Mr. Harrison listened attentively, without interrupting. His face grew darker and darker. "That's outrageous, Eleanor," he said when I finished. "I can't believe Michael could do such a thing. I've known him since he was a child. He was always such a kind, decent boy." "People change, Mr. Harrison. Or perhaps I just didn't know my son. But now it doesn't matter. What matters is what I'm going to do next." I explained my idea to him. I wanted to review all my financial dealings with Michael. I wanted to get back all the money I had given him and, if possible, revoke the gift deed for the apartment. I knew it would be difficult, that it would cause a storm of indignation, but I was ready for anything. "Eleanor, do you understand that this will be a very serious step? It will completely destroy your relationship with your son." "The relationship is already destroyed, Mr. Harrison. They destroyed it themselves when they kicked me out of their lives. Now I'm just going to pick up the pieces and build my life anew. And I won't let them use me anymore." Mr. Harrison sighed. "All right, Eleanor. I understand your decision. I will do everything in my power to help you. Let's look at your documents." We spent several hours going through the papers. Mr. Harrison carefully examined each document, making notes in his notepad. He explained the legal intricacies, the possible risks, the chances of success. I listened attentively, asking questions, clarifying details. My mind worked at an incredible speed, analyzing information, forming new plans. "So, Eleanor," Mr. Harrison said when we finished, "the situation is difficult, but not hopeless. The money you transferred to Michael for the wedding was formalized as a gift. It will be extremely difficult, almost impossible, to get it back unless Michael himself agrees to return it. But as for the apartment, there are options here. The gift deed was drawn up several years ago, and there are certain conditions under which it can be challenged. For example, if it is proven that the donor was under duress or did not understand their actions, or if the donee attempted to take the life of the donor or their family members, or inflicted serious bodily harm. This, of course, is not our case. But there is another point. If the donee treats the donor with extreme ingratitude. This is a very vague wording, but we can try to use it, given what happened at the wedding. I thought about it. Ingratitude. Yes, that's exactly what they showed. But how do we prove it? It will be difficult, Eleanor. We need witnesses, evidence of their behavior. But if we can gather enough facts, then we have a chance. However, it will be a long and exhausting process. And it will most likely become public knowledge. "So be it," I said, my voice firm. "I'm ready for anything. I won't let them humiliate me with impunity." Mr. Harrison looked at me with respect. "All right, Eleanor. Then let's begin. First, I will draft an official letter to Michael, in which we will demand the return of the money given for the wedding. This will be the first step to show them the seriousness of your intentions. And we will start gathering evidence of their ingratitude if you decide to go all the way with the apartment." I nodded. "Do whatever you deem necessary, Mr. Harrison. I trust you completely." After Mr. Harrison left, I felt a little better. Not because the pain was gone, but because I had started to act. I was no longer a passive victim. I was a fighter. And I was going to fight for my dignity, for my life. I spent the rest of the day reflecting. I recalled all the moments when Michael and Tiffany showed their callousness, their greed. I remembered how Tiffany constantly hinted at my money, at my property. How she convinced Michael that I should help them because they were young, they needed to get on their feet. I remembered how they ignored my advice, my requests. How they laughed at my old-fashioned habits. I remembered one incident that particularly clearly showed me their true nature. It was last winter when I fell seriously ill. I had a severe flu and I couldn't even get out of bed. I called Michael, asked him to come, bring medicine, buy groceries. He said he was busy, that he had a lot of work, and that Tiffany couldn't come either because she had an important meeting. I lay in bed for several days, completely alone, until a neighbor, a kind woman named Anna, came and helped me. She brought me food, medicine, cleaned the house. And Michael and Tiffany never showed up. They didn't even call to ask how I was feeling. This thought brought a new surge of anger within me. How could I have been so blind? How could I not see that they were using me, that they didn't value me? The next day, I received a call from Michael. I didn't answer. He called several times, then sent a message, "Mom, why aren't you answering? What happened?" "We're worried." Worried. I scoffed aloud. Worried that I might do something? Worried that I won't be silent. I didn't reply to his messages. I didn't want to talk to him. I wanted him to feel the same way I did, coldness, alienation, indifference. A few days later, Mr. Harrison called me. "Eleanor, Michael came to see me. He's very concerned about your silence. He said you're not answering his calls or messages. He doesn't understand what's going on." "Let him not understand," I replied. "Let him think. Let him remember what he did." He said Tiffany is also very upset. "She doesn't understand why you're behaving this way." "She doesn't understand?" I laughed. "She understands perfectly well, Mr. Harrison. She just didn't expect me to resist. She thought I'd be silent and cry into my pillow. They said they need money, Eleanor. That they were counting on your help to finish renovating their new apartment." "Renovating their new apartment?" I repeated, and irony crept into my voice. "So, the money I gave them for the wedding is already gone? And now they need more? Well, let them look for it somewhere else. They won't get anything more from me." I felt a fire igniting within me. It was a fire of determination, a fire of struggle. I wasn't going to give up. I was going to fight to the end. And I knew I would win this battle. The week after Michael and Tiffany unsuccessfully tried to get into my house flew by in a strange, tense anticipation. I didn't answer their calls, ignored their messages. My phone lay on the table, vibrating from time to time, but I didn't even look at it. Let them call. Let them text. Let them feel the same indifference I experienced at the wedding. My resolve grew stronger each day, transforming from hot anger into cold, steely will. Mr. Harrison regularly kept me updated. Michael and Tiffany were confused. They didn't understand why I was behaving this way. They tried to contact him, asking questions, but he, following my instructions, simply replied dryly that all my actions were legal and that they should contact me directly. Of course, they couldn't do that, as I wouldn't open the door for them. They were trapped in a situation they had created themselves. I knew that silence was a powerful weapon. It made them nervous, guessing what I was planning. I imagined their bewildered faces, their attempts to understand why I, their old, helpless mother, had suddenly turned into an impregnable fortress. This thought brought a strange, bitter satisfaction. One morning, as I was having breakfast, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. Standing on the doorstep was my niece, Olivia, my sister's daughter. Olivia had always been sweet, but a little naive. She worked at a small firm and always complained about money shortages. I often helped her, lent her money, bought gifts for her children. I opened the door. "Olivia? What brings you here?" I asked, trying to appear calm. "Aunt Eleanor." "Hi. I was so worried about you. Michael called, said you weren't answering, that you were acting strange," she began, her eyes darting across my face, trying to catch any emotions. "Strange? Why strange?" I raised an eyebrow. "Well, he said you don't want to talk to him. Or to Tiffany. That you're mad at them." "Mad?" "Olivia, this isn't just being mad. This is something far more serious." I invited her into the kitchen, poured her some tea. She sat across from me, her gaze full of curiosity. I knew she hadn't just come for a visit. Michael and Tiffany had probably sent her as a scout. "Aunt Eleanor, please tell me what happened." "Michael is so worried. He says you had an argument at the wedding, but he doesn't understand why." "He doesn't understand?" I scoffed. "He understands perfectly well, Olivia. Or he should. He allowed his wife to humiliate me, his mother, at their own wedding. To kick me out of a celebration I helped pay for. Olivia's eyes widened. Kicked out? How? Why? I told her in detail everything that had happened. I told her about Tiffany's words, about Michael's silence, about how I had given them all my savings for the wedding, and in return received only contempt. I saw the expression on her face change. First, there was curiosity, then shock, then indignation. That's just unthinkable, Aunt Eleanor. How could they do that? It's Michael. Your son, she exclaimed. Precisely, Olivia. My son, whom I raised, to whom I gave my whole life. And now he has simply cut me out. And what are you going to do now? She asked, her voice full of sympathy. I've already started acting. I contacted a lawyer. I'm going to review all my financial dealings with Michael. And I'm not going to let this go. Olivia was silent, processing the information. I saw a thought flicker in her eyes that this might affect her too. She had always counted on my help, on my support. But, Aunt Eleanor, this will ruin everything. Your family, Olivia, is not just blood ties. It's also respect, love, support. And when all that is gone, there is no family. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. Olivia stood up, her face bewildered. I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry, Aunt Eleanor. Don't feel sorry for me, Olivia. Feel sorry for them. Because they've lost far more than they think. She left, and I knew she would immediately run to Michael and Tiffany to tell them everything she had heard. This was part of my plan. I wanted them to know that I wouldn't be silent, that their actions wouldn't go unpunished. After that visit, Michael and Tiffany's calls and messages became more persistent. Now, calls from other relatives were added, trying to reconcile us, to convince me to forgive and forget. But I was unyielding. I politely but firmly explained my position, telling them what had happened at the wedding, how I had been humiliated. I saw their faces change, how they began to understand that the situation was much more complicated than it seemed. Some of them expressed sympathy, others, condemnation, but no one could deny the facts. I felt the tension building around me. I knew Michael and Tiffany felt cornered. They were used to me always being there, always helping, always forgiving. But now I had changed. I had become different. And that scared them. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison was working actively. He gathered all the necessary documents, prepared the lawsuit. He informed me that Michael and Tiffany refused to return the money given for the wedding, claiming it was a gift. I had expected this. But it only strengthened my resolve to go all the way. Eleanor, I am ready to file a lawsuit in court to challenge the gift deed for the apartment, Mr. Harrison said over the phone. But I want to warn you again, this will be a very public process. All your family secrets will become public knowledge. Are you ready for this? I am ready, Mr. Harrison, I replied, my voice firm. Let everyone know what they did. Let everyone know how they treat their mother. I felt everything inside me tighten with anticipation. This was not just a lawsuit, it was a battle for my dignity, for my honor. And I was not going to lose. The next day, I received a summons to court. I held it in my hands, and my heart pounded. It was an official document confirming that my life would soon change forever. I felt a slight tremor, but immediately composed myself. No, this wasn't fear. It was excitement before the decisive battle. I called Sarah to tell her about the summons. She was shocked, but immediately expressed her support. Eleanor, I'm with you. If you need my help in court, I'll come. I'll tell everything I know. Thank you, Sarah. Your support is very important to me. I began preparing for court. I recalled all the moments when Michael and Tiffany showed their ingratitude. I wrote down all the details, all the dates, all the words. I wanted to be ready for anything. I knew they would try to portray me as crazy, old, inadequate. But I wouldn't let them. The days until the court hearing dragged on unbearably slowly. I felt as if I was in the eye of a storm. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Relatives continued to call, trying to persuade me to drop the lawsuit. Some of them even came to my house, knocking on the door, but I let no one in. I was focused only on the upcoming court case. One evening, as I sat in the living room, contemplating the upcoming process, I heard a knock at the door. It wasn't Michael or Tiffany or any relatives. It was a courier. He brought me a huge bouquet of white roses and a card. I opened it. Inside it read, "Eleanor, we are with you. We know you are right. Don't give up. Your neighbors." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. It was so unexpected, so touching. I didn't know my neighbors cared so much about me. This gave me a new surge of strength, a new confidence that I was doing the right thing. I wasn't alone. I had support. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. I put on my best suit, which I had bought specifically for this day. My heart pounded, but I felt strong and confident. I knew it would be a tough day, but I was ready for anything. When I entered the courtroom, I saw Michael and Tiffany. They were sitting on the defendant's bench, their faces pale and tense. They looked at me, and in their eyes, I saw a mixture of surprise, fear, and indignation. They hadn't expected me to be so strong, so determined. Next to them sat their lawyer, a young, self-assured man. He whispered something in their ears, and they nodded in response. I walked to my seat, next to Mr. Harrison. He smiled at me, trying to encourage me. The judge entered the room, and everyone stood. The proceedings began. Mr. Harrison began to present our case, citing facts and referring to laws. He spoke calmly, confidently, providing irrefutable evidence of their ingratitude. He recounted how I had been kicked out of the wedding, how they had ignored me when I was sick, how they had demanded money from me. Michael and Tiffany's lawyer tried to object, dispute our arguments, and portray me in a bad light. He spoke of me as an old, resentful woman, that I was making things up, that I was trying to get revenge. But his words sounded unconvincing because Mr. Harrison kept presenting new facts, new evidence. Then it was my turn to testify. I stood up, and my voice was firm and confident. I told the court everything that had happened, without embellishment, without emotion. I spoke of my love for my son, my sacrifices, my disappointment. I saw Michael and Tiffany squirming in their seats, their faces growing paler and paler. I told them how I had given them all my savings for the wedding, how I had bought Michael an apartment by selling my beloved cottage. I told them how Tiffany had kicked me out of the wedding, and how Michael had stood by silently, not saying a word in my defense. I told them how they had ignored me when I was sick, how they had demanded money from me when I had already given them everything I had. "I am asking the court for nothing but justice," I said at the end of my testimony. "I just want them to be held accountable for their actions. I want them to understand that you cannot treat people this way, especially those who have given you their entire lives." Silence hung in the courtroom. The judge listened attentively, making notes in his notepad. Michael and Tiffany sat with their heads down, not daring to look at me. I felt that my truth had reached them. The courtroom was filled with tense silence after my testimony. I stood, feeling my knees tremble, but my gaze was firm and directed straight ahead. The judge, an elderly man with piercing eyes, looked at me intently, then shifted his gaze to Michael and Tiffany. Their faces were pale, and they avoided my gaze, as if afraid to confront the truth I had just spoken. Michael and Tiffany's lawyer, young and self-assured, attempted to refute my words, claiming I was a malicious and vengeful old woman who was trying to ruin her own son's life out of personal resentment. He tried to portray me in a negative light, asserting that I had always been overbearing and controlling, and that Michael and Tiffany were simply trying to break free from my guardianship. But his words rang hollow. They couldn't overcome the pain and sincerity I had poured into my testimony. Mr. Harrison, my lawyer, immediately stood to object. He calmly and refuted every accusation, presenting facts and witness testimonies. He called my friend Sarah as a witness, who confirmed how I had been sick and alone, and how Michael and Tiffany had not come to my aid. She spoke of my selflessness, how I had always cared for Michael, and how deeply I had grieved over his estrangement. Her words were simple but sincere, and they made a strong impression on the court. Then Mr. Harrison moved on to financial matters. He presented to the court all bank statements confirming the amounts I had transferred to Michael and the documents for the apartment I had bought him. He emphasized that all these actions were done out of pure love and a desire to help, but in return, I had received only neglect and humiliation. He argued that such behavior fell under the definition of extreme ingratitude, which provided grounds for challenging the gift deed for the apartment. The court hearing lasted several hours. The atmosphere was tense. Every argument, every word was weighed and analyzed. Michael and Tiffany looked increasingly dejected. Their self-assurance vanished, replaced by confusion and fear. They whispered to their lawyer, but it seemed even he couldn't help them. Finally, the judge announced a recess. I left the courtroom, feeling drained, yet at the same time invigorated. I had done everything I could. I had spoken the truth. And now everything depended on the court's decision. In the hallway, Sarah was waiting for me. She hugged me. "Eleanor, you were magnificent. You held up so well. I'm so proud of you," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Sarah. Your support means so much to me," I replied, feeling tears welling up in my own eyes. We sat in the courthouse cafeteria, drinking coffee, trying to relax. I felt the tension gradually dissipate, giving way to exhaustion. I understood that regardless of the outcome, I had already achieved a moral victory. I had upheld my dignity. I had not allowed them to break me. An hour later, we were called back into the courtroom. The judge returned to his seat, and everyone in the room held their breath in anticipation. He began to read the verdict. Every word echoed in the silence. The court, having considered all the evidence presented and having heard the testimonies of the parties, concludes that the actions of the defendants, Michael John Smith and Tiffany N. Smith, towards the plaintiff, Eleanor Mary Smith, can be qualified as an act of extreme ingratitude. Specifically, the act of humiliating and expelling the plaintiff from her own son's wedding, to which she made a significant financial contribution, as well as the systematic neglect and disregard for her needs, indicate a violation of the moral and ethical norms underlying family relationships. I listened, and my heart pounded. I couldn't believe my ears. The judge continued. Based on the foregoing and guided by relevant article number of the Civil Code of State, the court rules to declare the gift deed for the apartment located at apartment address concluded between Eleanor Mary Smith and Michael John Smith null and void. The apartment is to be returned to the ownership of Eleanor Mary Smith. To recover court costs in the amount from Michael John Smith and Tiffany N. Smith in favor of Eleanor Mary Smith. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Michael and Tiffany jumped to their feet, their faces distorted by shock and indignation. "What? This is impossible. This is unfair," Tiffany cried. Silence in the court, the judge sternly pronounced. Mr. Harrison squeezed my hand. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but this time they were not tears of pain, but of relief and triumph. I had won. I had achieved justice. Michael and Tiffany seemed unable to believe what was happening. They looked at me with hatred, but I paid them no mind. I looked at Mr. Harrison, at Sarah, who were smiling at me. I felt as if a huge burden had been lifted from my shoulders. After the court's decision was announced, I left the building, feeling free. The sun shone brightly, birds sang, and the world seemed so beautiful. I hugged Sarah and Mr. Harrison. "Thank you. Thank you for everything. Eleanor, this is your victory." "You fought and you won," Mr. Harrison said. The next day, news of the court case spread among all relatives and acquaintances. Some of them called me, expressing their admiration and support. Others, those who had previously condemned me, now remained silent or tried to justify themselves, saying they didn't know the whole truth. I felt their attitude towards me change. I was no longer an old, helpless woman. I was a woman who had stood up for her dignity, who had shown everyone that she could not be treated that way. Michael and Tiffany tried to appeal the court's decision, but their appeal was rejected. The apartment I had bought Michael returned to my ownership. They were forced to move out. I learned that they had to rent a small, modest apartment as their financial situation had significantly worsened. The money I had given them for the wedding was spent, and now they had no funds for repairs and furnishing their new home. I felt no schadenfreude, but a deep satisfaction. They got what they deserved. They faced the consequences of their actions. I decided not to sell the apartment. I decided to rent it out and use the money for my own needs. I had always dreamed of traveling, and now I had that opportunity. I started a new life. I enrolled in painting classes, which I had long dreamed of. I started meeting Sarah and other friends more often. I started taking dance lessons. I felt young, energetic, full of life. I discovered a world I had never even suspected existed before. One day, while looking through old family photos, I came across a picture of Michael, still very small, sitting on my lap, hugging me. I felt a slight pang in my heart, but it was no longer as sharp as before. I realized that I had forgiven him. Forgiven him not because he deserved forgiveness, but because I needed to free myself from that pain, from that burden. I didn't seek reconciliation with him. I didn't call him, didn't write. I simply lived my life, enjoying every moment. But sometimes, when I was walking in the park, I would see him. He looked tired, aged. He wouldn't meet my gaze. I understood that he had realized his mistake, but it was too late. My life was filled with new colors. I traveled the world, visited places I had only read about in books. I saw the Great Wall of China, the pyramids of Egypt, the Eiffel Tower. I met new people, learned new cultures. I felt truly free. I bought myself a small house by the sea, which I had always dreamed of. It was cozy, bright, with a view of the endless ocean. I spent every summer there, enjoying the sound of the waves, the cries of the seagulls. I felt happy. One day, as I sat on the porch of my little house, watching the sunset, I received a letter. It was a letter from Michael. I opened it, and my heart beat faster. He wrote that he was very sorry, that he had realized his mistakes, that he missed me. He asked for forgiveness. I read the letter several times. I felt different emotions warring within me, pain, anger, but at the same time a slight regret. I understood that he was truly remorseful. But it was too late. The bridge was burned. I didn't reply to his letter. I simply put it on the table and continued to watch the sunset. I understood that my life now belonged to me. I had built it myself, chosen my own path. And I was happy. My story became a lesson for many. It showed that you cannot underestimate people, especially those who have given you their entire lives. It showed that justice will always prevail if you are willing to fight for it. And it showed that even in the darkest tunnel, there is always light if you believe in yourself and do not give up. I lived a full life, enjoying every day. I was surrounded by the love and respect of those who truly valued me. And I knew that my revenge, my victory, was not in hurting them, but in finding my own freedom and happiness.